Washington, D.C., power flows through information. But what happens when the most sensitive military intelligence in the world ends up on the wrong phone? In the halls of power, a national security advisor makes a fatal miscalculation. On the other side of the world, a special forces team walks into a perfectly orchestrated trap. When the dust settles, 4 American soldiers are dead, 3 more captured. And the most catastrophic intelligence breach in modern history is just beginning to unravel. Signal Lost, a 6-part podcast thriller about betrayal, courage, and the devastating consequences of a world where even our most guarded communications are never truly secure. When everyone is listening, nowhere is safe. Signal Lost. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Calaroga Shark Media.
Hi there, I'm Johnny Mac. No news today. Today we celebrate the life of Mitchell Lee Hedberg, who passed away March 30th, 2005, at age 37. It's hard to believe it has been 20 years. Born in Minnesota, but finding his comedy voice in Florida clubs, Mitch Hedberg became a cult hero after his 1996 appearance on Letterman. If you've ever seen a broken escalator and thought temporarily stairs, you're keeping the spirit of Mitch Hedberg alive. I know personally, my daughter will offer me frozen bananas regularly just to tee up the joke. If I walk past a particular sandwich chain, I will say, "Did you know that ducks eat for free at Subway?" If I'm at a soda machine and they're selling Mr. Pibb, I will take a picture of it and text it to friends and say, "Dude didn't get his degree." Mitch Hedberg's deadpan delivery, sunglasses, hiding his stage fright, his unmistakable cadence made him instantly recognizable in New York comedy clubs and on tours across the country. Mitch passed away 20 years ago in Livingston, New Jersey, not too far from where I live. Today, let's celebrate the life and the career of Mitch Hedberg. My guest is Jason Zinoman from the New York Times. You guys know Jason, friend of the show and listener of the show. Jason is a critic at large for the culture section of the New York Times. He writes a column about comedy. You'll hear me reference Jason probably 3 times a week on the podcast. He is fantastic. 2 sections here. The first part is about Hedberg. Then while I had Jason, I wanted to discuss some other comedy things. We recorded this on Wednesday, so we didn't talk about Taylor Tomlinson, for example. That happened after. We didn't talk about Mulaney episode 3, so just want to put that in context. Anyway, here's friend of the show, Jason Zinoman. So what was your entry into Mitch Hedberg? Did you discover him later? Did you discover him like 10 years ago? There was kind of a Hedbergisance with people quoting him on Twitter. Where did you come into Mitch?
This is embarrassing, actually. I don't want it. You started with the tough question, which leads me to an embarrassing confession. But I'm going to make it because I think it illuminates something critical about Mitch Hedberg, which is I just found an email where I was talking to a friend only a little before I got the job as the comedy critic. So this is like 2010, something like that. So it's after he passed away, where he mentioned Mitch Hedberg. And I said, "Oh, who's that?" So that's embarrassing that I got this job without knowing who Mitch. You shouldn't hire me because I have now steeped in Mitch Hedberg. But I think what it also reveals, outside of my lack of qualifications, is that Mitch Hedberg was not that well known among non-comedy obsessives. And there were many more popular comedians than Mitch Hedberg when he died. And it's also a great reminder that popularity isn't that important. The people who are really have a lot of followers and a really big deal right now, the media thinks that we have to pay attention to all of them. We don't. Mitch Hedberg is more well known now than he was when he died. And the reason is the same reason why great art is always, that is one of the metrics for success, is how you age. What happens over time? Like, there are a lot of people who are very popular right now who no one's going to care about after they die, or, 10 years after their work. A lot of them, right? And there's going to be some people who are, not that popular, don't have Netflix specials, who are going to be like Mitch Hedberg, where it's going to be, of course you're going to know who Mitch Hedberg is. And I think he was a person who the comedy cognoscente knew who he was. Clearly I should have, but I didn't. And, but when he died, but he wasn't like a massive star. And certainly if you compare him to the person he's always compared to in terms of influence, Stephen Wright, he didn't have the mainstream breakthrough that Stephen Wright did. I think you could say something similar about Andy Kaufman, who has gotten more and more famous after he's died. I think it's fair to say he's one of the most important and influential. I think Mitch Hedberg and Andy Kaufman are two of the most influential comedians in modern times. And neither of them were, top 5, 10 echelon in popularity in their time.
I think you're right. My audience will be sick of me telling the story, but real quick, I was at the car show. Jim Brewer was doing his radio show. Jim was a little frosty because the night before, Jim had to do an extra hour because Mitch didn't show up for a show. I believe that was Mitch supposed to be opening for Jim Brewer in 2005, which, if you say to somebody now, like, oh yeah, Hedberg was opening for Jim Brewer, people are like, what? What are you talking about? But I think that's a spot where Mitch was at, and you talking about maybe you weren't familiar with him. I'm trying to remember. I think I have a false memory of meeting Mitch. I think Mitch was up and did Brewer's show, and I can kind of sort of remember being in the back, but I don't have a clear memory of meeting the guy because back when I was doing serious comedy, people came up every day. So, I don't remember every time I met somebody. I think I'm aligned with you there that, yeah, maybe he wasn't as famous as the legacy. So is this a James Dean thing? And I've talked about this with some other people. Is Hedberg still doing one-liners 20 years later? Does that translate in the age of social media and feeding the beast? And I got to go on TikTok. Now, and I'll stop talking in a second. I think in the Instagram era, his stuff really popped. 10 years ago, you throw up a one-liner, you make a cartoon of it. It was great. I'm not sure in the current feed the beast crowd work. I'm struggling to picture Mitch Hedberg 25.
I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I think he'd be doing well. I think he's just too talented. He's too original. It's interesting. ChatGPT came out and there was a lot of discourse about can it replace comedy. One of the first comedians that AI nerds fed into AI models was Mitch Hedberg. And I was sent a lot of, oh, look, hey, this AI can reproduce what Mitch Hedberg did. And I would listen to it and I would say, no, this can't. This is actually, you think this is an argument for AI and it's the opposite. He's that good. So, I mean, it's academic. Who knows? It is like James Dean to some degree. And then I think the legend of him grew because he died at 37? Anybody who dies in their 30s, there's a certain glow about them that like a long career where you see them age and old, and lose their fast. I mean, Stephen Wright, again, is a good comparison. I think he's had a fascinating career, but we've sort of forgotten a little bit. He was someone who I was into as a kid, and it was radical when I first saw he was a radical figure. And I don't think maybe people grasp that when they see him today.
Stephen, again, one of those comedians, much like a Kinison, much like a Dice, the first time you saw him, you're like, wow, this is different. And as I've been prepping for these interviews this week and thinking about Wright, I don't want to use the word versus, but Wright and Hedberg, I feel like Wright performs material to the audience, whereas Hedberg was in it with us, especially because he would do busted jokes and be like, hey, I got a punchline here. Ha, that didn't work. And, it would just be like, okay, all right. Yeah, it didn't work. You're right, buddy, but I got your back. Whereas I feel like Steven is just doing his thing on a stage, almost like a one-man show.
This is actually one of my favorite subjects, which is, it's a real comedy nerd question. What's the difference between Stephen Wright and Mitch Hedberg? And I've asked a lot of comedians, because, of course, they're very influential, both of them. And I looked them up. Bobcat Goldthwait has told us, he said, when you watch Mitch, you learned who he was. And you had some speculation over, like, who's this guy voted for? What's his childhood? With Stephen Wright, he did not let you in. I think you're absolutely right, by the way, about the perform material versus Jeselnik, who was a huge Wright. Wright was a huge influence on him. He said to me, I think they're compared to each other because they both told absurd non sequiturs. Mitch Hedberg had the appearance of mentally fumbling around on stage, looking for his jokes and figuring out as he went along. Wright was deliberate. This sort of goes to what you're saying. He was serious. He was not fucking around. Mitch just walked on stage from a party. And of course, he's not using this as an insult. He's saying that was the vibe he gave. Wright just walked on stage from another planet. And I think that's a pretty good explanation. But maybe if you're just looking at it from a legacy standpoint, and this is going to sound cold, but dying was a good career move. Because you look at young comics. I mean, there's a lot of comics I follow on Substack who are often analyzing, mulling over, philosophizing about Mitch Hedberg. The one I want to shout out, because I think is a comic that your listeners should also look up, is Mike Kaplan, who has a great Substack. He's a huge Hedberg fan. And he recently had a Substack about him, and he said this. He said, his jokes are songs, infinitely re-listenable, whereas so much comedy requires surprise to have its desired effect. Hedberg's has somehow transcended that. That is fascinating. Wow. And I think he's right. You can listen to, an elevator can never break. It just turns into stairs. And even if you've heard it before, there's still a pleasure in hearing it again. They are more like songs, and that's very high praise. Because once you take the surprise out of comedy, you take quite a bit out of it. I think, what Mike does in his Substack is then he goes on to analyze some jokes. He looks at the philosophy of them. They actually have a depth to them, especially in how they kind of mix. And this is in part, I'm influenced by Mike's writing on this, like the ordinary and the metaphysical, in a way that rewards sustained analysis and thinking.
I never thought of that it is like music, that I don't mind listening to the stuff over and over. And part of the production, I think it's Strategic Grill Locations, is the one with the bass, which just gives the whole album a vibe and helps bring those one-liners to life and that whole low-key party vibe.
Yep, I think that's true.
You got me thinking, too, about, What If Island, and when you pointed out Mitch was 37, you're trying to picture 57-year-old Mitch Hedberg. Does he have the same hairstyle? It's like when you try and picture 80-year-old John Lennon with, maybe looking more like Larry David. It's so hard. These people get fixed in your mind at a certain age.
It's true. I mean, what's interesting, right, is, and I don't think I would get too much argument about this, his is the kind of comedy that doesn't age, in the sense that if you didn't like it in 1998, you're still not going to like it. If you did like it, it still works now. It doesn't need a lot of context. It's often based on logic. It's based on playing with language, on the slipperiness of language. Often when people, like every once in a while, I'll have somebody say like, oh, I have like a teenager's getting into comedy. What would you suggest? In the list of people who I say, it's Mitch Hedberg. Now, granted, maybe he'd evolve and he would become, he'd be talking about topical stuff, or maybe he would move in a personal direction or something. But my suspicion is he wouldn't. Who knows? We'll never know.
I'm hearing the bass in my head and somebody going, I got headed to a signal chat.
Exactly.
That'd be amazing. I think one thing about Mitch that during the soul searching this week that has revealed itself is he's one comedian that appeals to all the camps, the Comedy Cellar people, the brick wall smoking cigarettes people, the LA Alti people, the blue collar guys. I think everybody liked and respected Mitch's comedy.
Well, okay. I'm going to push back on that. Yes,
please. I love this discussion. Go.
Yes. I think you're right, but that's in part because he died in 2005 before not just comedy, but the world fragmented. Would everyone still love him so much if he was still around and he was, either taking a side in these various culture war battles that we all know of? I don't know. I think what's significant about him is that he's at the head of an entire family tree of comedy that is incredibly legible to us today, but wasn't not that long ago. And, it's Tig Notaro, it's Sheng Wang, it's Todd Barry, it's even Hannibal, it's Dimitri Martin, this kind of deadpan, one-liner, surrealist, like now that's a type of comedy. It's, yes, he hung out with people as diverse as Dave Attell, and Todd Barry, I think, deserves some credit. He has his work, and Mitch has shared some qualities. But I really think he helped invent a branch of aesthetic comedy. And there's still people who now are coming up who are like, okay, that's a legitimate, I don't need to be weird LA clown or New York club comic. There's this other option. And if you're good at it, people will respect you. And that's true. I think that gets overlooked in a lot of the culture war stuff, is that there's club comics who think Chris Fleming is great. Mm-hmm. And there's alt comics who think Bill Burr is incredible. Like, if you're really good, in fact, to be honest with you, not that this matters that much, but like, I find that the alt people are easier to give up praise for someone who's totally different than them, and the club, same for the club people, because there's less competitive, right? Yeah. It's the advantage of doing what we do, is that we don't really have a dog in one of the fights. We can actually call balls and strikes with more fairness, in my opinion. But so I think, in the reason Mitch, to take it full circle, the reason Mitch is sort of a safe harbor to praise is because he's on the other side of life. Where I think he both seems very modern, but he never got on he never joined the social media madness that was to come.
So in the age of AI, there's a YouTube page, Almost Beatles Songs. The other day, they released this George Harrison thing that they brought to life, pulling stems from different things. Absolutely incredible. So we've got enough audio of Mitch, and I know for a fact there at least was a notebook of Hedberg's material that he never got to perform. Lynn Shawcroft showed me the notebook. I saw it, if I'm remembering correctly. And, I don't want to go all Brian Williams here, but I think at Sirius we did a special where some comedians performed some of those jokes one time. I think that happened. But anyway, the notebook exists and we have AI. Would you want to hear AI Hedberg deliver those or no?
Oh, boy. This is the George Carlin estate would not be for this. That's for sure.
That's true.
I gotta say, I'm not.
But it's his material. So the Carlin thing wasn't Carlin's material. This is Hedberg's material. So I'll give you an example. On Netflix, the Churchill documentary I thought was amazing because they used Churchill's books and had AI Churchill voice it. And I thought it really worked well. You still have the issue of timing. Performing the words of Mitch Hedberg, is that the devil?
It's a great question. And we're really struggling with these issues. And it turns out that there's so much more AI in our culture that we consume than we think it is. We found this out with the Academy Awards recently. It turns out the Bob Dylan movies got AI, and they all got AI. And the idea of taking these rigid stands about AI is sort of moot. But I guess if we're to take Mike Kaplan's point, his jokes are like songs. I think I'd be fine for it as long as it's labeled as such. And so it's like a little bit like covers. And why not listen to it? I do think that there's a human element to delivery and to pace and to how he would, that I'm open to AI having a positive impact on culture, but I'm more on the skeptical side. Among friends, when we talk about this stuff, I have friends who are slowly using AI in ways that are not necessary, but make their work a little bit easier. I'm a hardliner, except with a few exceptions. But I feel like unless you really need to use it, slippery slope.
And I think the question would be, who's putting it together? When it's Paul McCartney saying, I think John might have done this, George might have done that, that's one thing. If it's some rando, that's a whole other thing entirely. Last question on Hedberg that I want to ask you about a few other things is, do you think he is more popular than he was 10 years ago? I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I feel like 10 years ago, he was in the zeitgeist and on the internet, and maybe we had better Twitter back then than we have now. I feel like he is starting to become a comedian of the past. A name that keeps popping to my mind this week is Richard Jenny, who was huge. And nobody ever says the words Richard and Jenny in a sentence anymore. Are we starting to get away from Hedberg, or is there more of a legacy here?
I think you have a good point that Twitter helped him because he really was perfect for Twitter. But Twitter now is sort of a ghost town for comedy, at least. So maybe he's plateaued, but I don't think he's not like Richard Jenny. As I said, this Mike Kaplan thing was just like a week ago. And I think Matt Ruby had something on a Substack about, so he's still cited and talked about the analog, and I'm working on a piece right now about just a quick thing on Andy Kaufman. And I don't know what you think. Is Andy Kaufman, I think Andy Kaufman's bigger now than he ever has been.
The Man on the Moon movie surely helped. And there was that renaissance there. I think the Kaufman Awards definitely helped when that was a little more visible than it is now. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember in the early years, Kristen Schaal, for example, being one of the winners of that. But yeah, the Kaufman doc coming back, depending on what Bob Zmuda was doing on any particular day, there'd be a lot of Andy or no Andy at all. But I feel like Kaufman's got a legacy, sure. I
think this Kaufman doc is very good. And I think you could point to figures like Sacha Baron Cohen, Nathan Fielder, the whole sort of trolling aesthetic, the sort of blurring of lines between real and fake. It feels like Andy Kaufman really anticipated a lot of what's in the culture now in a way that gets him talked about. Mitch was, first of all, I think that Stephen Wright did get there before Mitch, which is relevant. I remember asking Stephen Wright about Hedberg, and he wasn't very expansive, but he did say something like, "It's nice that I was influenced." You know, he made it clear that he was there before. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. So yeah, maybe his legacy is not as fixed, but I still think he's in the canon.
Anytime I look at a top X comedians of whatever time period, you know, he's clearly up there. We could spend a year debating what such a list would look like, but he's definitely way up there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we'll take a quick break, come back, and I want to talk to Jason about some other things. It's basketball time. What kind of basketball, John? College basketball. Think about it. Does anything beat March basketball? Sitting there on those 4-day weekends, watching all the games. Nothing beats that. Bring the fun of a bracket to every game day by making entries on Underdog. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. Do you want to win up to 1,000 times your money? You can with Underdog. I dig playing higher or lower. You pick a player, and whether or not they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats. The stats include points, assists, rebounds, and more. Get out your phone, pick somebody, go higher or lower. Total fun while watching March basketball. And if basketball's not your thing, they've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. You can create entries with all basketball selections or mix and match across other sports. You want to throw some soccer in there? Throw some soccer in there. You can play with as little as $1. If you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into $1,000 with just your hoops knowledge, or perhaps your soccer knowledge. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using the promo code DCN to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code DCN. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus credits instantly upon first deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus, Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus, Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Void where prohibited. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Underdog app, promo code DCN.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So I believe you were at the Conan Mark Twain Awards. What
was
the room like?
I was. I snuck in.
What was the room?
They didn't give me a ticket, so I had to go as a +1.
Oh, wow.
They rejected my offer for a ticket. I don't know why.
That's crazy.
I thought it was a little crazy.
Sorry, my brain just fried. It's not like you're some dude in a basement doing some dopey podcast. It's the New York Times.
Well, they actually gave, this is probably too inside baseball to care about, but they actually gave it to a reporter from the Times. And they said they couldn't give it to me because of they gave it to her, but they gave her 2 tickets. So we were like, all right, I'll just go with her.
All right, that's good.
So it turned out to be fine. No one gave me any hassle. They were actually like no yonder pouches. They couldn't have been friendlier.
It's funny you bring up the yonder pouches because I haven't seen really anything leak, but I guess it was a professional crowd, right? Industry and the New York Times. You guys aren't going to start bootlegging things on your phones.
They could have. It was actually, I think it was mostly Kennedy Center people and subscribers, but the whole comedy industry was there. I mean, it was actually a great show. I got to say, I'll be really interested to see what they cut out. But, Conan, for one thing, inspires a lot of love and loyalty, and then people brought their A game. So it was probably like the best comedy lineup I'd seen this year. And it was tight. I mean, I don't know what they're going to cut. On top of the fact that there's the whole Trump and politics of it all, but there was a lot of comedy nerds. Jay Leno got hit almost as bad as Trump, and maybe worse. There was one point when I think it was Kumail had this fake TED Talk where he pointed out that he had a bunch of people on the cover of Time, and he had Hitler, Stalin, Cosby. These are like the covers of Time. And then he had Jay Leno on the Jay Leno cover. And I was like, that's a hard one. But so there was that. There was a lot there for comedy nerds to chew on.
Poor Jay. I mean, there was a time circa 1982, 83. He's coming out in a leather jacket and he was fairly edgy and a frequent Letterman guest. And that Jay's long gone, at least in the eyes of his peers.
It's true. And to be fair, Conan did not say a word about him. But I think his friends knew that he would enjoy going back over some of those late night wars from another period. Yeah.
It's crazy that post late night talk show, we're at peak Conan. The Oscars, obviously a great look for him, the podcast, but he's more popular than ever and he's not on late night.
He's had an incredible year. I feel it's funny. I did a big profile of him before this. I feel my timing was very good. I was lucky because then he got the Oscars and the Twain, and I felt like he is having this moment. And I thought he really rose to the occasion. His speech was, he had this tough call because he's not a political comedian. In fact, he told me he thinks Trump's bad for comedy. Doing Trump jokes is not his instinct, that comedy is not going to make social change. If anything, it will have a backlash. And yet, he's put in this situation. The Kennedy Center is now in an unprecedented move. The president has made himself the chairman of the Kennedy Center and gotten rid of the Democrats on the board. It seems sort of apolitical is now overtly political. Not mentioning it, people boycotting it would itself be a political gesture. So how do you stay true to your principles while responding to the moment? It's a very tricky problem that I think he thread beautifully and ultimately made a very political speech, but it was all through this aesthetic appreciation of Mark Twain, which is consistent with who he is. He is like he's a Harvard nerd, a comedy nerd who really has read Mark Twain and chapter and verse and has opinions on it. And, it was an aesthetes speech, but with a real hardcore political core. And then it ended. I didn't mention this in my piece, but the funniest bit, I think, was Will Forte at the end came out as Mark Twain and then roasted all the other previous Mark Twain winners. He said that Adam Sandler can't read. He said that all this, and written by Conan, obviously, or written by Conan and Will. And then ended with this kind of really crazy, silly, surreal vignette with all these multiple Mark Twain's, almost like the Slim Shady video. It was a great show.
What a great run for a guy that, went from who's that to is this late night show going to make it to Thursday to being at the top of the game now. Switching gears on late night, and I'll go first. We're recording this on Wednesday, so unless you've got a secret time machine, we've only seen 2 episodes of Mulaney. I think it's not working, and as somebody who's been in broadcasting for 30 years, I get what they're trying to do. I get that they're trying to do the chaos, but as a producer, they got to put a format on it. It's too all over the place, and the caller segment has to go.
My prejudice is completely in favor of what they're trying to do, right? I like chaos. I like experimental. I like original Letterman. I like Chris. And I agree with you. I think I like all the riffs. I like the ambition. I like the aim. So I tend to sort of grade in a curve. But then, for instance, if I was to rank the acts at the Conan Mark Twain Award, and there's some heavy hitters on here, Mulaney is either 1 or 2. It's a reminder of how damn good he can be. He was unbelievable in the show, and you're like, that reminds you what he does well, and you watch him on that talk show, and you're like, he looks like he's flailing half the time. So you're right, the talk show thing isn't quite working, and you've got all this talent. I hope it, but if I'm honest, the original run of it, I was mixed on it too. I felt like there was a lot of things that didn't work. Let me also just defend him for a second and say there wasn't a good talk show in history that worked right off the bat.
Right.
Conan took a year to get his legs. Letterman took a while. So I think we should give credit to people who are taking ambitious moves and who are messing with the form. And he's no question is he doing that. I'd rather see someone fail. Look, I'd like to see Magic Johnson or talk show. It's like a huge disaster is way more fun than another mediocre conventional talk show.
Like the Jerry Lewis talk show. You ever watch clips of that one? That's painful. Right? But I think you're right. I think as an executive, I'm sending Mulaney notes on the equivalent of Wednesday. So maybe let him do 5 shows before I get in there.
I mean, one thing I'll say is just that I saw a funny tweet from, or it was an Instagram of Chris Gethard, who is, again, wants this to succeed. And he said something about like, you got to get a new mic or something or let me help you with the sound design for the call-in or something. And so even people who are really rooting for this can see that like it could be a little more polished.
Can you help me sort my feelings with Bill Burr? And I don't even know what I want from you. I'm not on the soapbox with Bill Burr's gone woke and I used to like him. That's not at all how I feel. However, maybe Bill is overexposed right now. I didn't love the special, and now every time I see Bill Burr appeared in the media, I'm kind of making what I call crinkly face and be like, I don't know if I need a Burr timeout. I don't even know what I'm asking you right now, but where are you in the Burr-iverse?
I've heard you, as I'm a religious listener of this podcast, and I've heard you, I'm not on the same page with you, and I would just remind you that most people don't know who Bill Burr is.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like, I just wrote a piece on him. It was interesting to me how many people at the New York Times I had to like introduce who Bill Burr is and why he's important. And so while on one level, yes, it seems like he's overexposed, he's everywhere. But to a lot of people, this is their introduction to him. And I know that you agree that he's great at what he does. And look, I think his stuff on Elon, who else is saying that? Johnny, I mean, who else? How can comedians of all people be quiet about this ridiculous, like, how can they not be tearing this guy to shreds, right? Like, Bill Burr is actually doing what so many younger comics should be doing. I'm not even talking about Trump. I'm talking about Elon Musk and billionaires, right? Like attacking from this kind of blue collar position, or to watch him on Bill Maher, or watch him on Jimmy Kimmel be the kind of free Luigi. Or as I said, I did a piece on him, which I watched him in rehearsal going at the director. I think he's being very true to his nature in that he's not picking any side, going after whoever's in front of him. Is the new special his best special ever? No, I don't think it is. I think it's pretty much like it. But if you like what he does, I think there's stuff there to like. But like, for instance, my parents, who have never, that was their first special, they thought it was great. I
think you just helped me. You know what happened? The indie band I like is playing stadiums.
Yes. Now, are you going to see Glengarry and Ross?
No, I would like to, but I haven't done anything about it. That often happens with Broadway and me. It took Back to the Future closing down for me to go, oh, we got to go. And my daughter's a theater kid and knows how to get tickets to things. So I should probably do something about it. Have you seen it? Is it good? I'm going on Tuesday. I saw a little bit in rehearsal and he is perfectly cast. Yep.
And he can obviously do wonders with the language. And so I can't wait. I mean, it's a killer cast. It's one of my, when I was a kid, it was one of my favorite plays. And so I'm excited to see him do it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today as we remember Mitch Hedberg. And always fun to talk to you about all things comedy, no pun.
Great. Always great being here. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Jason, for popping on today. I'm not this good. I used AI to help me shape some of the words about Hedberg. And the AI nailed it here. Mitch Hedberg used to make us laugh. He still does, but he used it too. All right. See you tomorrow.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It is the world's most secretive election. When a pope dies, ancient traditions begin. A silver hammer, a destroyed ring, over 100 cardinals locked away from the world, choosing the next leader of 1 billion faithful. White Smoke, the path to a new pope, from Calaroga Shark Media, wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're fascinated by UFOs, aliens, ghosts, demons, cryptid creatures like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, and Mothman, then I have the show for you. The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. Each week, we investigate different claims of the supernatural and try to shed light into the darkness, bringing you the top guests and experts from around the world. Enter the fray. Then join me, Dave Schrader, your host, as we investigate all aspects and claims of the supernatural and paranormal. Listen on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Good Pods, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Deezer, Player FM, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. The answers to life's biggest questions and miracles and mysteries awaits you. So join me each week, 2 brand new episodes of the best in paranormal podcasting, The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader.